Welcome, welcome, welcome. Great, wonderful, welcome. And I'm very happy to welcome my beloved friend, George Mumford, who spoke at our benefit yesterday. How many of you were there? I see quite a few of you were there. Wonderful. And George and I have been friends for many, many years, and I was remembering that I actually was at the historic because George met Edie, his wife, there, party of our friend Stephanie Morgan 26 years ago when they met. So we've been friends for a long time, and George has been part of our Insight Meditation community of teachers for a very long time as well. And his, I guess, a little bit later incarnation as a sports psychologist and mindfulness coach for the Chicago Bulls and the Lakers during their championship seasons. Not a coincidence, by the way, that happened that way. Has led him, as he says, from locker room to boardroom, and he coaches all kinds of people now, including us when we're fortunate to have him here with us. So welcome to George. And the shape of our day, as many of you know, we will meditate now for about 35 minutes and then have a chance for some teaching and conversation together. And this is being filmed for Korean television. I don't know who actually watches the Buddhist TV network in Korea. That's something interesting to find out. And also live streamed, I believe. Are we live streaming today? Yes? Welcome, live stream friends. Apparently the answer is yes. So George and I are really happy to be here with you. We'll sit together. Oh, and I do some guided meditation for the first part of the meditation, and then we practice just trusting the silence and what emerges in the stillness as we sit together. So find your comfortable sitting posture. This may not be the most exciting part of your video, you guys, but you know it's not an action movie, so. So closing your eyes if you're comfortable doing that in the group, otherwise just lowering your gaze so you're looking within instead of looking around. And just taking a deep breath in and relaxing. And one more time. Relaxing, letting the shoulders drop. Letting our attention drop into the body. Just sitting still. And you can feel the shift of energy in the room when we orient to the stillness of the body, just sitting quietly. And no matter what's going on in our minds or hearts, we can always tune into this simple stillness of the body as we sit. It's a practice of metta or loving kindness that I call the jelly roll because there's a sweetness. There can be a sweetness to it. And in this practice, we use our imagination to explore and invoke the awareness and appreciation and acknowledgement of love and caring in our lives. So I want to invite you to invite some people that you will either visualize or imagine near you. You can put them in a circle around you. And how you choose these individuals is by this following criterion, that when something good happens to you, they are happy for you. And when you're ready, just to acknowledge each person, perhaps with a little bow, or maybe a hug if you feel close to them. And as you look them in the eye and offer this gesture of acknowledgement and appreciation, just let them dissolve and melt into your heart, one by one. This is receiving loving kindness. Really fully opening your heart, and one by one greeting, acknowledging, and taking in that love, taking in that being. And then when you have acknowledged and absorbed the metta, the loving kindness of each one of these beings, just sitting with this fullness of heart, and you can continue with a loving kindness practice if you have one, or simply rest in loving, mindful awareness, the breath, this body, these feelings and thoughts. Just being with life as it unfolds, moment by moment. Life in the form of this sound, this sensation. This flow of thought and feeling. Life in the form of you. And this particular moment in all eternity. So this morning, George and I are just going to offer some reflections on whatever is related to service in our world. And I'll just begin by sharing, because I was at the retreat with Ram Dass on Maui this past week, and Ram Dass he's really spent more time being sick than being well this past year. He's 88, he's very frail. And one of the beautiful things about the retreat, besides that I get paid to go to Maui, one of the beautiful things about the retreat is that Ram Dass appears no matter how he is. I mean, he rallied. He wasn't sick during the retreat. He rallied just a couple days before it and enjoyed it and was really present and wasn't sick afterwards, because we saw him afterwards. And he came out on his wheelchair, and he really he's pushed out by his attendants, who he really can't do anything now without help. And imagine how humbling that would be if you were in that situation. And he's been sitting in that wheelchair for 20 years, and now he can't really talk very well. So he comes out onto the stage and he's beaming and radiating love. So right away you feel joyful, even though you're looking at somebody who's kind of dying, but you just feel joyful because he's radiating so much love. And he can't predict when he's going to be able to say something. Like sometimes it comes out, sometimes it doesn't. And I was sharing before that he led a meditation where, and we can all just do this together for a moment, just you close your eyes and you say very softly, and he would lead this, I am loving awareness. This is a way to shift our identity from the small, compressed, often suffering self to something bigger. The water we all swim in. It's just over and over saying, like a mantra, I am loving awareness. I am loving awareness. And then he would just say, loving awareness. Loving awareness. Loving awareness. And then you can open your eyes. But because he couldn't really modulate his voice, sometimes it would come out, I am loving awareness. And sometimes it would come out, I am loving awareness. Or, it would just come out in a funny way. And I was just marveling at the opportunity for all of us, 350 people were there, to witness somebody so willing and generous to share exactly who they are and where they are at this moment in their life, even though it wasn't that presentable exactly. We usually don't blurt things, one thing loud, one thing soft. We learn to modulate our speaking, and he can't do that. And yet having him just be there, and especially all the young people, I felt, when are you going to get to see somebody in, a disabled person, an elderly person, an unwell person physically? Maybe, we don't know. We always feel every year. It could be his last year. We don't know if he's dying, but it doesn't. He's very frail. And when you're 88, the chances are a little more likely than, when you're 28. But just to be able to witness somebody being so loved and revered and beaming that out to everybody else and having so much to contribute, even though, in spite of and also because of their limitations in some way. It was really something special and beautiful, and that I wish more older people, more people who are living with disabilities, more people who are facing all kinds of challenges, to be able to tap into that level of self-compassion, self-respect, and self-love, to be able to radiate that to others and be free, all of us, because we all have our various disabilities. We all are aging and headed in the very same direction, all of us, right? 6 feet under. And just to feel that, it was like the title of our benefit yesterday was The Liberated and Joyful Heart. That's what I felt in his presence, that liberated and joyful heart. And what a generous service it is to all the rest of us, and to each other, when we feel free enough, liberated enough to be exactly who we are with each other. And I think you, Barbara Streisand, are a beautiful example of that. I just want to say thank you.
Oh my God.
Yeah, I think you are like that. I think we all appreciate you for that, as a matter of fact. Yeah.
Maybe
Yeah.
my week, month, year.
Good. Good. You deserve it. And by the way, if you like the science, being generous, um, feeling that you belong to something that's a community, more than just you, uh, all of these things actually, we now know, keep our telomeres long. Now, these are chromosomes. The telomeres are actually the caps on the end of the chromosomes. So it's kind of like the little plastic thing on the end of a shoelace, if you ever get to see a shoelace anymore. And um, and we actually know that the DNA, there's a modifiable part of our DNA, and it is these telomeres that respond to our circumstances of life. And it turns out that when we're stressed and miserable, that coating at the end of the chromosomes gets eroded and shortened. And when we are feeling relaxed and we can be who we are and we're at ease and we're feeling the happiness that comes from service and generosity, because there's two kinds of happiness. There's what we call hedonic happiness, which is something fun happens and we're happy. And then there's what's called eudaimonic well-being. And these have distinct gene regulatory programs. And it's the eudaimonic, the service, generosity, connecting kind of happiness that actually strengthens our telomeres. So there's a bit of science to support what we know for thousands of years from the wisdom teachings of the world. And I want to turn over to George if you something you'd like to add
Yes.
before
Good
we
morning.
open up to everybody.
It's great to see everybody here. Great to be here. And we already taught a class already, and between that class and this class, I realized I've done a lot of volunteer work in my life that I forgot to claim. So I'll claim some of that now. For 6 years, I lived in the Cambridge Insight Meditation Center, and so I volunteered there as a practice leader. So I would, we sat Monday through Fridays, 7 o'clock in the morning, and then 6 in the afternoon and the evening. And so I was a volunteer, so I would do volunteer stuff at the center. And the other job I had was we would get requests from different organizations for someone to come in and teach meditation. It could be a business, it could be a juvenile home, or it could be like one of my friends. She worked at a school where a lot of children that have been abused physically or sexually would go in, and I just did a lot of volunteering at the meditation center, and as a result, I learned how to present the teachings in a way that was language so people could hear it. But at the time I was volunteering, I didn't have that in mind. And then when I got into recovery about 35 years ago, I did a lot of volunteering, going into hospitals and institutions and sharing my experience, strength, and hope with people around having a substance abuse issue. And then there was a place, Trudy might remember this place, it's called Interface. It was this group of people got together and they said, well, we're going to have this alternative learning center. And so they'd have classes Monday through Friday at night sometimes, but on the weekends they had workshops. So in those days, before some of the folks like Deepak Chopra and Bernie Siegel, John Kabat-Zinn, I'm probably leaving some people out, but a lot of people would come to this place from all over the world and teach, and I was a volunteer there. So I get to hang out with folks, and sometimes I'd pick people up, but I would set up rooms. But I had so much joy, and I learned so much from that volunteering. And then fast forward to when I started working with sports teams, my roommate from college, Al Skinner, he was coaching the men's basketball team at BC, and so I volunteered with them for that whole season. I just said, I wasn't working, and I volunteered, and that turned out to be a job. They actually paid me for that year, and then it ended up doing more work. And I will encourage people who are learning something, especially people who want to teach meditation or want to teach yoga, whatever it is, that volunteering is a good way to get some experience. But the interesting thing is, especially I learned this in recovery, if you want to keep something, you got to give it away. And so this idea of generosity, and of course, is an antidote to one of the things that we struggle with, which is greed. And generosity is a antidote to that. And so there's a lot of good stuff that can come out of volunteering. And I shared a little bit in the previous class that I volunteer compassion, love, just engagement when I go into different places. And over the years, when I used to come here when I was working with the Lakers, I used to come here and I used to stay in a particular hotel. And what I did was I would greet people and I say hi. And then when we won a lot of championships in those days. And I think they're about to do some more of that. We used to get hats and T-shirts and stuff from winning the championships, and I used to take them and I used to give them to the hotel employees. And I talked to them, and as a matter of fact, when I go back to that hotel, there's one guy a couple of people were still there, and they still talk to me, Mr. Mumford, how are you, and all of that. But the interesting thing is when I'm really nice to people, even when I worked in corporate, my last couple of years working in corporate, I knew everybody. Because I had these practices. One practice I had in one company I worked at, I would go and speak to people nobody else was speaking to, or I would say good morning to everybody. And there was this one young lady that I spoke to every morning for about 2 years before she spoke back to me. And it was just these spiritual practices that I had, and they were a form of volunteering, but it's really more about, because people don't know this, but I'm more of an introvert, and I refer to myself as a social contemplative, because I can be in with people, but I had to have my downtime. Have to have a good amount of that, and I don't know how much of that has to do with growing up with 8 sisters, but but I think I'm still trying not to be dominated in my youth. But my sisters love me now, but I say okay. And yesterday I was feeling a little bit rough, and she said, "Oh, you don't have to teach this morning." And I said, "No." I said, "I'm gonna go home and go to bed. I won't go to dinner with you, but I'm gonna go sleep and I'll be ready." And so I get so much from, of course, I get to hang out with her more. But I get so much from being here, and although I don't belong anywhere, I belong everywhere. I talked about that a little bit, because I come in and I'm being with people, but I can come in, and I remember one of the ways Phil Jackson used to refer to me when I used to come into his teams was I was like a breath of fresh air, because I would come in and I would just come in and do what I need to do. I blend, and then I'm gone. And then I'd come back, and so even though I'm not here a lot, when I come here, I feel like I'm home. And I feel like I just blend, and I'm here, and then I'm not. But then again, at some point, that's going to happen in reality. I'm going to breathe in and breathe out. I'm not going to breathe in again. But right now, I'm breathing in and breathing out. And as a good friend of ours, John Kabat-Zinn, he said 2 things that really were profound. One is, as long as you're breathing, there's more right with you than what's wrong with you. And the second thing he said that I find is still true is people are complicated, including me. So I think that's pretty much all I want to say. But I love you all, and I'm so happy to be here. And one of the things that I intend to do is to meet. Depending if we were in church, I'd be talking about soul to soul. Here I'm talking about meeting divine spark, or Buddha nature to Buddha nature, or Christ consciousness, and whatever it is, masterpiece. That when I go in, no matter where I am, I'm around excellence. I'm around a masterpiece. And so if I can remember that on a good day, then that's going to have a huge impact on my perception and my interaction. So I just wanted to offer that's possible, that we have this magnanimous heart, however you want to call it, and open heart, open mind, and just see the greatness in everybody.
Thank you, George. Thank you so much. And thank you for reminding all of us about times when we have volunteered, you know, because it's true. I just don't even remember them necessarily.
Mm-hmm.
Like 4 years of Al-Anon intensive care. There's a lot of volunteering there and countless things that I'm sure everybody is remembering, times when you've done that in some way. And do you remember when you were kids and the teacher would ask, like, who wants to erase the blackboard? I don't know, maybe only girls wanted to do it, but
No.
I remember being... Do you remember, like, wanting to be the one who got to erase the blackboard?
Mm-hmm.
And some of us are old enough to remember blackboards and erasers and things like that. But, you know, when you're little, you want to be... It comes very naturally, that impulse to want to help out, and it is a special role. So we want to just open up for some conversation with you. And the conversation that we have here is about, you know, what happens on our meditation cushion or chair, and then also what happens when we bring that out into our lives. Anything that you have to share or questions, this is your turn. Kenny, yeah.
I guess I wanted to ask about volunteering, and when you go into situations where there's a lot of suffering to volunteer, and maybe it's a more destructive kind of suffering, not like, in a sense, not like people who are victims, but people who kind of have destructive patterns, and you can kind of see that. Like, how do you bear witness to that and, you know, continue to volunteer and serve, but not feel kind of like the weight of the heaviness or like of the suffering? Or like, how do you recuperate afterward?
Do you want to say something?
Yes, I have a story. So I've done a lot of work in prisons. And I remember the first time I went into this particular prison, and I was living at the meditation center at the time. And when I left, first of all, when I went into the gatehouse, before you even go in, it was really oppressive, and it was just really dark energy. And after I went in there, it took me about 4 days of meditating before I got back to normal. And then I realized that and I talked to people in that space, I realized that I had to do a ritual before I went in. And so I would sit in my car for about a half an hour and do metta. And then I would imagine that I had this kind of like this sheath that would let good stuff in, but wouldn't let the bad stuff in. And so I had to learn that. So that was a ritual, but also it's being clear about what we experience and don't identify with it, but also recognize that when we get around that I won't say, just say opposite of light. When we get around that impacts us. So to think that we can go in there and not be affected, we will be affected, but if we know that, and then we have a way of cleansing or ritualizing or saying, this is not me, and just noticing it is important. But also we have to recognize, because not all of us can work in those kind of situations. So that's where the wisdom comes in, and really get clear about what we can and cannot do, and not take it personal if we can't work in there. Because I found, and I used to train teachers to work in prison, not everybody can work in prison. I don't care. You could be a doctor, you could be a lawyer, you could be a nun, you could be a priest. You can go in there and get manipulated unless you understand some things and understand where you are. And even now, when I have people, especially some of the spiritual communities, they'd be pen pals with folks in prison, and I'd have to explain to them that they're in a controlled environment. I love them, they're compassionate, but when they're not in that controlled environment, you don't know what's going to happen. So just because you have a relationship, so what they encourage you to do is not have relationships with them at all, because it protects them and it protects you. And I've had some of the inmates that I worked with come to the meditation center and I'd interact with them or whatever, but that's different. But whatever we go into, we just have to be really clear about what we're doing there and what's the appropriate way, a non-harmful way of being with ourselves and being with others. Does that make any sense?
Hi. Thank you so much. I'm just so touched. But, you know, I too have worked in early release prison programs. I was their social worker. Oh, my goodness. And domestic violence. I run groups for recovering addicts. And I do presentations on compassion fatigue because that's what happens to us. You know, we're empathic and we want to give and we want to help but then we have to look at our own boundaries because otherwise there's nothing left inside of us to give. We're just, you know, it's detrimental to our health. So we do one of the major strategies for dealing with compassion fatigue is mindfulness. And when I do it, I help people to meditate and, you know, don't isolate. There's so much, but that's the first thing I thought about was the work that a lot of us do. It's compassion fatigue. It's different than burnout. It's different than vicarious traumatization, what we see on the news. But we are working with these folks every day. And it just takes a lot out of us. It's like losing our skin. So.
You know what was interesting yesterday is listening to Father Greg Boyle, who is the founder of Homeboy Industries, and which is, for those of you who may not know, is the largest gang rehabilitation and reentry program in the world. And he obviously is working, you know, all day long with people whose behavior is probably not that good, and he's very inspiring person. He's kind of like our LA saint. And one of the things that he shared was that, because I asked him, what about your prayer or meditation practice? What do you have that sustains you in this way? And because he doesn't ever talk about burnout or compassion fatigue ever. And he said, well, I get up kind of early in the morning. What time do you think? 3. Gets up kind of early. And he said, and that's when he does his practices. But he made it clear later that time that he spends, and we didn't ask exactly what he does, but praying, meditating, the practices that whatever he does, that time is the source of the love that he can beam out to everybody he meets and let them know that they too are deserving of love and respect. And that really was, you know, the intervention that has turned out to work, surprise, surprise, was to treat gang members like human beings. But it's just echoing what you said, really, Michelle, about the mindfulness, that the meditation, that the practices we do here really help. Yeah, thanks. Joan needs a mic.
I have a question about I'm trying to understand the difference between effort and over-efforting with my meditation. And the reason that I'm asking the question is because I've been meditating for 7 years, and the first 2.5, I was able to sit daily. I think I had beginner's mind for 2.5 years. I think I was lucky. For the last 4.5 years, I'm struggling quite a bit. And the reason I have trouble with effort is because I kind of grew up having to put in a lot of effort to just grow up in the home and the childhood that I had. And now I almost feel as if effort isn't such a good thing. It doesn't make sense. So I'm trying to make some sense out of how to put effort, because that's what I need. I think I've needed it for the last 4.5 years, and I'm not sure how to do it.
You can handle
the
this?
coach.
Yes. So there's right effort and then there's wrong effort. And so I spent a couple of decades with wrong effort. And that is that warrior, lone wolf, pushing through, no compassion. And then one day I was reflecting and said, dude, man, you're making this way too complicated. The slow motion gets us there quicker. It's if your mind is right, then your effort's going to be right. So right effort, the main thing of right effort is to get into a wholesome mind state. If you're meditating with an unwholesome mind state, you're going to struggle. And what do I mean by that? We talk about greed, hatred, and delusion, right? So right mind, right view has to do with non-greed, non-hatred, non-delusion. So another way of putting it is generosity, compassion, love. We've been talking about love and awareness. So that part of right effort is to abandon, let's think about thoughts, unwholesome thought or a thought that's negative. Right effort is to how to abandon an arisen unwholesome thought. So one thing is how to abandon it. The second thing is how to prevent it from arising in the first place, right? And then the third thing is to have a wholesome mind state like love or mindfulness. And once it has arisen, how to maintain and balance and perfect it. So the short answer is, if your mind is in survival mode, you're going to be fight, flight, and freeze. You know, that's an autonomic nervous system, which is in, you know, it's all left brain. And it's also, the other side of that is when you're in a growth mode, then it's a totally different chemistry, and that's when you're in the relaxation. They talk about it, I like to call it rest and digest. And you can notice it when you meditate, your stomach starts talking to you. Stuff you're digesting food when you're in the stress mode, all of that blood leaves and goes into your big muscles, and you don't digest the food. You end up like I had a lot of GI problems growing up. So it's really getting clear about what's your intention, and can you have a wholesome mind state, wholesome thoughts. So this is really simple. It took me years to figure this out. If your mind is right, everything else is right. So if you start off with love and kindness, or your mind, and this is what they call the broaden and build theory, when you're in a positive mind state, your cognitive functioning is enhanced, which means you see more, you think clearer, and you know your whole brain chemistry, everything works differently. So it's that damn simple.
So the first step is for me to be aware of the thoughts.
Yeah, make your mind,
and
your thoughts are going to be reflected, especially the self-talk. Do you all know what I mean when I say self-talk?
Yeah.
So that's the main thing, because the self-talk is a reflection of your mind state.
Right.
And one of the foundations of mindfulness is be aware of, when your mind is full of hate or full of concentrated, whatever it is.
Right.
So once we understand that, so it's like a pair of glasses. I got on the hate glasses or the fear glasses. I'm going to see things. It's going to lead to wrong everything.
Right. I think I have aversion glasses on.
Yes, that's it.
So
yes. And then part of it might be you don't know where you're going, but you don't want to be where you are.
Right, totally. Yeah. Because then I have the aversion glasses on. I sit, and then like 10 minutes, I got to get out. I got to get away.
Of course,
I can't do it anymore.
Because what you're doing is you're feeding your aversion habit.
Right. Yes, that's right.
That's a good one, huh? So when you understand that, then the right effort is. I would read more about what right effort is,
okay.
and talk about it, doing exactly what you're doing, asking what is right effort, or how do I change my mind. And the main thing is, instead of going through the 4 efforts, all you need is the one, how to have the unarisen state of love, compassion, mindfulness arise. Then once it has arisen, how do you sustain it, maintain it, and make it more of a habit?
Right. Okay. Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Welcome.
Yeah, thank you, everybody. Thank you for your practice. And let's just sit for a moment together. So whenever we have the opportunity to be together and study and practice these teachings on how to access our liberated and joyful hearts, how to bring love into a world that really needs our care. Whenever we have the opportunity to do this together, we appreciate, we express our gratitude for anything that we've learned or that we hadn't heard before, the moments of truth, moments of beauty, moments of lightness, moments of laughter together. We express our appreciation for all of this by an act, creative act of the imagination, offering the goodness of our practice to all beings everywhere without exception. We just gather the goodness and offer it. May we and all beings grow in our capacity to embody love for ourselves and each other and our world. Thank you. Thank you, everybody. Thank you, Korean Buddhist Television Network. Thank you. And we thank you, George, for coming and being with us.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
And we have refreshments, and please stay and talk to somebody you haven't talked to before. Say hi, have some refreshments, and celebrate our volunteers. Thank you.